we're going to be dependent on oil and natural gas for decades, folks. And the question's going to be, where will we get our energy from? And will we absolutely support American jobs? And in particular, our veterans' jobs. A lot of people are talking about wanting to help our veterans. The greatest way to help a veteran is to give them access to a well-paying career. Vets4Energy, we look at that. We evaluate those things, and we collectively come together for the greater good of our country.
So why do you associate with Vets4Energy? I guess I'm going to ask you, Keith, why are the issues important to you?
I got involved with Vets4Energy about 5 years ago, and probably 7 or 8 years ago, I started to talk about energy policy, because energy policy and a comprehensive energy policy is a way out of a lot of the problems that we have. One, it's a way to reduce clearly a way to reduce our dependence on foreign oil and reduce our involvement overseas in conflicts that have now been going on for several decades. But also it's a way to bring jobs, good paying jobs to America. It also, obviously it's a fairly well taxed industry, so it's a way to generate revenues. It's essentially a way to really spur our economy if we become a global energy exporter as opposed to a net energy importer.
Odd question, but is it because you're a veteran you feel that way? Are these issues that are veteran specific?
I don't think these issues are at all veteran specific. I think as veterans we have a perspective because we've been overseas fighting, largely because we're not energy independent. It's not the only reason we're over there, but it's a lot of the reason.
Mm-hmm. You're kind of new to the Vets4Energy program, but you know the issues. Are those ones that you agree with?
Yeah, for me, Vets4Energy is kind of a home for me for developing new ways to cultivate new sources of energy that are more domestic. For me, as a scientist, I believe that climate change is something that is a real thing, it has a real effect, but the way that a lot of people are going about that, I believe, is wrong. And the thing that Vets4Energy does is it says, well, let's develop all forms of energy. And I really appreciate that, for one. And second, they come about it, in a way that makes sense. The Keystone XL Pipeline, for instance, makes sense because it allows us to gather resources that are local, and allows us to take that money instead of sending it overseas. It allows us to reinvigorate our own economy by producing it more locally. And as a veteran, national security is a big important thing to me. And so being able to, not only have that money here, but also to be energy independent, like Keith was saying, is very important. It does allow us to not be involved as in many conflicts. And like you said, that is one of the big reasons why we are in so many conflicts and why we have had so many conflicts.
Excellent. So let's go ahead and get into the Keystone. And James, I'm going to kind of tee this one up for you, but this picture here shows the different phases of the Keystone pipeline. And the dotted line going down is the proposed Keystone XL. The other two phases are already built. And so it's already crossing over. For some reason, this element of the Keystone XL got to be a big conversation and discussion. But from your perspective, energy infrastructure in the Keystone Pipeline, why is that important to Vets4Energy?
Well, it's important for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's going to create thousands of jobs. And I'm just going to go ahead and kick this off right now. A lot of people say, well, those are temporary jobs. Well, I grew up in a construction home, and every job was a temporary job. So we're not going to stop building houses. We shouldn't stop building infrastructure, and we definitely should have completed this pipeline years ago. It's been debated to death, for as far as a safety factor, as far as how it's going to help us as a country, and how it's going to contribute to our overall energy independence footprint. People say, it's oil coming from Canada, going here, going there, but it's the understanding that we have control of it where it goes from point A to point B, and it's not all just going to sit in that pipeline. There are a tremendous number of jobs, including jobs for veterans, that are going to be made available for this. And this is an improvement over the system that they currently have. And people talk like we don't have pipelines in America. Guess what? They're all over the place. And we have many of them that are moving, oil and gas safely and efficiently all across the nation. So why is Keystone XL important? Well, it's the bottom line of it creates the ability to move it faster, quicker, and process it in America. And we should do
it. And to piggyback on that, there's a thought that, well, this will stop this from being produced. The reality is this is being produced in Canada one way or another. So why wouldn't we as America want that oil to flow through America in the safest way possible, which is a pipeline? And if it flows through us and it flows into our ports, and the next thing is, well, it's being exported. If it's being exported, we're getting money for what we've exported. And that money is coming into America, which is being used in America. So I'd rather do business with things in America that spurs our economy than watching whatever's being produced be pipelined out to the West Coast and being shipped to China, for instance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the oil that is being produced there is going to be consumed. We're either going to consume oil from, overseas from the Middle East, or we're going to consume oil that's made here in the United States. And this is not going to increase, the total amount of oil being consumed in the United States. It's just shifting it from one area of the world to our area. And by shifting it to our area, like everyone has already said, it provides jobs. It also allows us to, take that money and reinfuse it back into our own economy instead of sending all of that money overseas. And it also, what was pointed out again, it allows us to export and make more money off of other people.
So in talking about that, Chandler and everybody, we can all agree that the KXL pipeline is something that we should have built a long time ago, and we're thankful that it's coming in now. So I'm excited to see the jobs that it's going to spur from it. I really am.
And how often, and how often do we have the opportunity to do something that 75% of America agrees with on both sides of the aisle, that it has been studied 5 or 6 times and found that it's safe and it's something that we should do? And how many opportunities do you have something that's that big of a slam dunk to actually go out and do and agree upon in today's climate? And this is a no-brainer.
Since you're saying that, I'm going to jump ahead a couple of slides. And this one's, when Trump was elected, he came in and within the first few days or weeks, he went ahead and reversed the previous administration's decision. After 8 years of study, the previous administration declined it. Why? What's the speculation from you guys?
So
try not to make it too personal.
So from my perspective, I think the decision was made, it was purely a political calculation, and it was purely made to appease special interest groups, and that's what the decision was based on. As I said previously, it's something that 75 to 80% of America agrees on both sides of the aisle. And James and I both had conversations with people on both sides of the aisle in Washington, D.C., and in principle, they agree that the Keystone Pipeline should exist, but it was all political to make special interest groups happy, as opposed to doing what was in the best interest of the United States of America.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you're right, Keith. I mean, you hit the nail on the head on that. I mean, it's just, and you're right. We met with several in D.C., and the conversations always went the same way. It was like they were controlled by a very small group of people, special interest groups, that constantly touted this as being dangerous, and it's going to have the effect of an asteroid hitting the Earth. I mean, it was just all kinds of crazy stuff that was being said. It was just unbelievable stuff. So,
and to James' point, we heard it's not, the arguments we heard, it's not clean. It's oil from the oil sands. Well, at the end of the day, the oil from the oil sands is going to be extracted. That's not our call. What's our call is how can it be transported? And the cleanest way to transport it by far is a pipeline. And why wouldn't we want our refineries refining it, which are much cleaner than refineries in China? So all of the arguments that were made against it, we're not looking at the global picture that we don't control what other people do. All we can control is what comes through us. And if it comes through us, then we have some control over how it's manufactured, how it's refined, how it's shipped. We don't have that if it goes to China.
Yeah, and that control is extremely safe.
Go ahead, Garrett. Sorry.
Well, and that control is extremely safe. I mean, again, the infrastructure that we have here in the United States, along with the regulations, and along with what the citizens of the United States demand, our oil production is very, very safe, and the transportation of it is through pipelines. Very, very safe.
Before we get into some of that safety thing, I just put up this picture of a smart pig that I'll ask you about in a moment, Garrett. But Keith, you're from Illinois, where a lot of refining is done. Mm-hmm. Can you put a real personal picture on those jobs in refining that people seem to just be blowing past now?
Well, as anyone who knows, who pays attention to the state of Illinois, Illinois is a people exporter and a job exporter, because people are leaving the state of Illinois because of the regulations that are involved there. And we do have refinery jobs. We do have an energy sector. And, frankly, some of Illinois' policies are screwing that up and causing those things to go elsewhere. And refineries provide real permanent jobs. And, we're getting a little off scope here, but when was the last time the country built a new refinery? I think it was in the 1970s. So there's real opportunity here by generating more infrastructure that actually keeps the oil here, gets it produced here so that it can be exported elsewhere. And then the money comes into the United States, and that money is used to buy goods and spurs other businesses. It's not just a single one-way transaction that only happens once. That money continues to be reutilized and done and spurs other businesses, including simple things just like restaurants and grocery stores.
Yeah, I mean, I know since the oil sands have actually kind of, before those jobs kind of went away. I mean, here in Montana, we saw home prices increase. We saw, more jobs getting infused into the area. I invested in a house before I started going to college, and I saw the price of it go up. So, it has a huge effect, and it's a huge dynamic effect on individuals around not only Montana, but also, in the refineries that are down south.
It's hard to put in a short little bullet phrase what a strong economy can do for the country.
Yeah, it's great. We have more people moving into Montana. We have more jobs here. Like I said, home prices are going up. Which equals to a lot of great things, better education, more infusion into the tax system, better roads, those kinds of things. It has huge, significant impacts that are too dynamic to even talk about in this discussion.
And we talk about national security, and historically, the legs of national security, the levers that we have, it's diplomatic, it's military, and it's economic. Well, I would suggest that energy is so big and so important to the entire world and the developing world that there's actually a fourth leg, and that's energy. You can actually influence world policy via energy and via energy security. A perfect example is if we think about Russia moving into Crimea. One of the reasons that happened is because we've delayed building, LNG ports to ship natural gas, liquefied natural gas, to Europe. If we were already doing that, then Europe would have been able to actually protest and do something and join in on the sanctions against Russia. But when they're completely dependent on Russia to provide their energy, then they can do nothing. And so that's how these things all tie together and why it's so important.
So the slide I got up now, the fear factors. That's where some of the controversy has been, that the pipelines are not safe. This is a picture of, we're saying, the smart pig, which is that little thing that goes through the pipeline checking for damage. Garrett, you're going to be a much better person to talk about some of the safety aspects in this smart pig. Can you elaborate on what this thing is?
Sure. So what you're seeing there is a smart pig and what we call a launching platform. The launching platforms and receiving platforms are the same. Basically, what you do is you take a device called a pig, which gets its name from a long time ago when they used to use bales of straw to do this. When they would clean out pipelines and things like that, they would literally just throw a bale of straw in there and it would squeal along the pipe, and that's where the name pig comes from. But today what we do is we have these things called smart pigs. There are some pigs still in today that they use for cleaning the pipelines because there is some gunk that kind of builds up on the inside of them that needs to be cleaned out, so that way the flow is more of a perfect flow regime. That way, you know, it's a little bit more efficient. These smart pigs, like the one you see in front of you, however, though, they have ultrasound devices on them. And those ultrasound devices allow an engineer to interpret data that shows, you know, where a potential leak could spring in a pipe. Or they can even launch these pigs before they put any type of product into the lines, and they can check and make sure that all the welds, all the connections are sealed. And they actually send these things down the pipeline while the pipeline is in use, because the flow of, you know, natural gas, oil, crude oil, whatever it may be that you're transporting, just pushes it along. And so it doesn't stop production, and it's something that can be done regularly, and it is done regularly, and it allows us to make sure that that pipeline, you know, whatever they're looking at, is safe, that there is no erosion, that there are no cracks, that there are no leaks. And so these types of devices really help us with, you know, making sure that these things are safe, and that's why they are so safe, and that's why they can maintain safety.
Technology's come a long way since the first pipelines were put in many years ago.
And yeah, from a bale of straw to this is, you know, kind of a big deal.
Right, and let's think about you know, how many pipelines there's millions of miles of pipelines already, and there's very few incidents already, and that's with older technology. And think of anything in your life technology-wise, whether it's cars, whether it's air travel, whatever it is, it's all become much safer over time because of technology. And and now the Keystone Pipeline's going in, that's going to have the latest technology available. So that's going to be much safer than anything that was done historically. So we should be looking to do more, you know, more pipelines, because it is so much more efficient. It is so much more clean.
Yeah, well, and the other thing is, you know, as engineers, we're always looking to, you know, like what's better, what's best, how can we make things safer? And so that is always a challenge that engineers are proposed, and they always meet those challenges by, you know, looking on the past, looking at, you know, what failed before and what works now. And right now we're sitting really well with the technologies that we have to be able to maintain pipelines in a very, very safe way. I mean, they're the safest way to transport any type of, you know, crude oil, gasoline, whatnot. These are high pressure systems. So, I mean, not only are they like thick walled, you know, they have pressure gauges, they have sensors everywhere, they have safety valves, they have, you know, check valves, they have valves that are in place that have algorithmic computers that run them, you know, that look for any kind of discrepancies or variance, you know, and those things can automatically shut pipelines down. So it's not even that you need someone there all the time, you know, where you might have like a human error. I mean, everything in a pipeline nowadays it is controlled via electronics and controlled via computers, and those computers have so many redundancies built into them, you know, from power loss to, you know, a computer failure, that you cannot get something that is safer because of those redundancies and because of the position they're put in, and because we've eliminated the human error that can be attributed to past events where, you know, where you did find, you know, events happening with pipelines that you would think of in the 1900s, because they didn't have computers back then, and everything had to be run manually. And nowadays that's just not the case. Not
totally unlike air flight. Planes now have so much control on them.
Yeah.
Let's get into this one where it's privately funded. To me, it's a big issue, and folks don't really represent or don't understand that so much of the energy infrastructure is being built with private funding, where businesses are coming in and investing, and it's not just a capital outpouring from the government. Is that an important issue here? James, you've talked to a lot of local communities. Is that one that the local communities acknowledge or look at when it comes to the Keystone Pipeline?
Yeah, a lot of people do, because they know where the government money that comes from to fund a lot of this stuff comes down to their pocket as the taxpayer. So obviously they like to see, you know, private enterprise thrive so that it will create sustainable jobs and careers. And so, yeah, it's very important that we look at that. You know, it's just like if you have, let's say if we decide that we wanted to create energy out of rubber bands, okay? And the government said, I'll give you $1 million a year if you create that energy out of rubber bands. They call that a subsidy, okay? But if I decide to put in a gas well and create energy, but the government says, well, we're not going to give you anything to do that. You know, it becomes a little bit more of not only a fact that tax dollars are being spent on something that may or may not work, and in most cases does not work, but then you got the point of, you know, a level playing field. So yes, I think it's very important. Privately funded is important.
Just want to jump back into the jobs thing that you also mentioned as well. Back then, I guess you covered it pretty well. Let's just get on to the next one here.
Well, and let's just go on and give this number right now. The oil and natural gas and petrochemical industry currently employs over 187,000 veterans. 187,000 veterans. So I think that that's very important. They have a total employment of 9.1 million people, and those are 2015 figures, by the way. Those numbers have went up significantly since then. So there's a lot of jobs that are out there, and a whole lot more jobs that are coming.
And if we grow our infrastructure and we become a bigger energy exporter, not only does it give us all the benefits we talked about as far as national security, but there's also all the economic reasons, which is we're generating jobs in America, and we're talking about good paying jobs in America. We're not talking about cashier at McDonald's jobs. We're talking about good paying jobs. However, when I say cashier at McDonald's, guess what? In those areas like Montana that built up, well, then all of a sudden McDonald's pops up. And there's those jobs too. So it's not only direct jobs, it's indirect jobs that happen from growing a piece of our economy like this.
Well, and speaking also with the investment, you know, the investors in the job industry here, the investments that these people are making into this pipeline will also guarantee future investments in cleaner renewable energy as well. A lot of these individuals that, you know, these huge energy companies, they're not going to just keep producing oil until, you know, clean energy comes along and says, okay, we're taking over. I mean, these are energy producers. They want to keep not only their businesses thriving, but they also want to keep employing individuals. So these investments in this Keystone XL pipeline also ensure that there's going to be a future investment in cleaner energy, which also means better independence and better energy independence, you know, as a country. And it also means that those jobs are going to transfer over from, you know, oil industry to clean energy industry, if that's something that you're worried about. So these investments and these jobs are going to keep becoming available because of investments like this and because of the Keystone XL pipeline. I mean, right now the Keystone XL pipeline and our use of hydrocarbons is a stopgap until we get to the clean energy, because that's what we're wanting to do, and that's the direction that we're taking right now. Because we understand with, you know, newer technologies that are coming out that we can actually be more energy efficient with cleaner energy. But the only way to invest in that, the only way to have the money for that, is to have investors like this and have jobs available.
And to that point, as far as cleaner energy and how that ties into the military, that's where the government should be investing their research dollars, is in things that help us help our military. For example, you know, using some of these alternative sources of energy to power a mortar or something like that, so that it doesn't have to be refueled, so that no one is being put at risk as they go out to put fuel and bring fuel to you know, to somebody sitting and operating mortars or security cameras or all of those types of ideas. If we have strategic reasons to actually invest money that may not be purely economic, and that's where you can generate new R&D, you find new opportunities, new ways to do things, and those can be actually brought then to the public sector on a much more competitive basis than you know, than they are currently. And again, it's helping our energy security. And even if we found the magic potion right now that allowed us to run on air and run all of our energy requirements, it would take 50 years plus to get all of our infrastructure changed over to operate off of that fuel. So
well,
it's
exactly.
So it's going to take time.
Yeah, and the other problem right now that we have, I think you hit the nail right on the head with that, because the huge problem we have right now with renewable energies is storage of that energy. So we're kind of in an area where, right now currently, that we wouldn't be, even if we had all the money in the world and everyone had solar panels and there were wind farms everywhere, we wouldn't be able to sustain ourselves because we just don't have the technology to store that energy right now efficiently. And that's why, building a Keystone XL pipeline, building pipelines, using oil is still going to be our number one source of energy for the next few decades, at least.
Kind of falls in that category of somebody's going to be doing this. Why isn't it us?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
So I just put up this one slide because I wanted to touch on protesting, because I know this is a big one amongst many of our members and veterans, that they fully believe in protest, but sometimes it goes over the line. James, I know you're especially passionate about this. Would you like to just touch on that protesting side?
I will tell you this, that we support everyone's ability and their right to freedom of speech and expression. But when it steps over the lines and becomes an act of domestic terrorism, then at that point in time, we need to pull the stop on that. And what I mean is going in, holding up a sign's one thing, going in and totally destroying an area and not allowing people freedom to move. At some point in time, you have to say, you've crossed the line. Say what you have to say, have a civil conversation, hang your signs, chant in the street, but stay out of the road, stay out of the way, and don't hurt people. Then you become something else. You're no longer a patriot. You're becoming a domestic terrorist, when you destroy stuff. And I mean, that's just the truth. That's the fact.
And, what I would add is that most of us that fought, we fought for the right to protest. And I would never want to see the right to protest be stopped. That's what happens in other countries. However, to James' point, there's a way to protest and there's a way not to. When you start to impede other people's ability to operate in their lives, earn a living, and you're doing it via your protest, then that becomes a problem.
Yeah, I think everyone should have the right to protest. I would disagree and not say that it's terrorism, because I think terrorism requires a level of malevolence far beyond what these individuals are having. But that doesn't mean that they need to not be held accountable for the things that they did, the mess they left, the violence that was incurred there. I don't think they were trying to incite, fear. But the other thing too is that we have kind of an issue socially, culturally, because sensationalism in today's day and age is, how people get a very large voice out there. And I think that was what these individuals were trying to do, was to get as much sensationalism to get a larger voice, which isn't exactly the best way to go about doing it, being violent, or doing anything that was illegal. They should not have done that, and they should be held accountable for it. And if they wish to protest the pipeline, I think they should have every right to. But again, like everyone else said, being violent, destroying property is not acceptable, and they should be held accountable.
We've gone a few minutes past our timeline, but I did want to, even though we were sort of doing it before, any last thoughts when it comes to the Keystone? Keith, we'll start with you. Is there one thing that you wish that all the audiences would know about the Keystone Pipeline?
Well, I think the most important thing to know about it is it's actually something that the vast majority of Americans agree upon and agree upon the benefits of it. So to me, that's as slam dunk and no brainer of a decision as you can make.
Yeah, I mean, even me, like I think, like I realize what hydrocarbons do to our environment. Like I realize, the global climate change, in the essence of, hydrocarbons are causing this. We're an influence of that. Yes, that is a scientific fact. But, the Keystone XL pipeline is not going to cause a huge impact on that. It's not going to make it so worse that we're not going to be able to survive or something like that, like some of these people are saying. It does allow us a stopgap, to, like I said, invest in cleaner energy and to keep going down that road. But we're still, like I said, far off from that. We don't have the technology for it. So even when I talk to individuals here, around the state, because I've asked a couple of people that I know are, more on the liberal side, and and even there's a lot of Republicans here, so they're a lot easier to find and talk to. But, some of the liberals that live here, I talk to them and I say, what do you think about the Keystone XL pipeline? And they're like, look, I understand that we're going to be dependent on oil for a long time. I want to see the investment in clean renewable energy, but it's part of who we are, and it's part of our energy resource, and it's the cheapest way to get things done. And that's usually the overwhelming here that I hear from the liberal side. And the Republicans, same thing. They say the same thing. They say, look, we like our environment too. We want to be able to hunt, fish, and do all those fun things, and go skiing and enjoy our motorsports in the wintertime. So yeah, we agree, that climate change is something that is happening. However, it's not happening on the scale that a lot of these people are talking about and making the Keystone XL pipeline such an evil thing. It's a stopgap, and we're in the middle of a transition, and we have to realize that, that's part of the trade-off of being in a transition, is that we're still going to have to build pipelines, and we're still going to have to use crude oil.
And one
James,
thing,
any last words?
Just real quick, I'd just like to say that, as you can see, we've got 3 people on here from 3 different areas across the country, and we have different views. And guess what? We were able to have a very civil and great conversation. And we would like to have these conversations like this with everybody, regardless of where your stance is at. Vets4Energy is truly the place where everybody can come to and have a voice. We truly do appreciate and respect everyone's freedom. And I just want to thank the 2 fellow veterans that came on here with me. And as always, I love working with you guys.
Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it. And yeah, I agree. I think conversations like this do need to happen, and I'm glad that they can.
yeah, thank you very much for having us. And yeah, open conversation and open debate is what we all fought for.